Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Nell with the Transformative Reading Teacher Group, and you are on Literacy Leadership Mentorship, and we are so grateful you are here. My colleagues, Teresa Owens and Terry Nolan, are live with us as well. All three mentors are on because we have someone we value deeply, and she has shared a lot with this world in terms of trying to help us figure out how to get this complex work done. Her name is Kelly Butler. She's coming live from Mississippi. She gave a talk at Big Sky this year after a request of mine, and I'm so grateful. And you also got to have a moment with John Maxwell at Big Sky too, Kelly, and I was so happy to be there for that as well. But I asked if she could take a moment and reflect on John Maxwell's laws of leadership and what it takes to lead this work, and look at a retrospective of what they did over 2 decades in Mississippi and align it with the laws in various books that John had written. And Kelly said she would. So tonight she's joining us live to share that story and to offer us an opportunity to grow with it. And I'm also going to throw something else out there. We've been talking about for a month, Kelly, something called freedom within the fences. And that concept comes from a superintendent in Wisconsin, classic, lots of pastures and fences in Wisconsin. And what is meant is for us is that it's allowing people to know where the fences are so they can stay within the boundaries of the fences. And once they have the knowledge and the skill and their expertise has risen to a level to show us that student outcomes are just really the product of their expertise, that they gain freedom, that autonomy in their classroom, in the fences, and or within a law, the fences being a law, the fences being the guidance from a law. So that's what we've been talking about. And one of the things we wanted to put out there is that it's always good to learn from somebody who's gone before, who's kind of knows the way and can kind of show the way and kind of maybe help us not step in the cow pies in those fences, right? So Kelly Butler, that brings us to you. We're so grateful you're here. Thanks for coming. And I'm just going to hand the mic over.
Okay, thanks, Nell. You are my friend and inspiration, and it's great to be with all of you. I'm imagining maybe some of you have seen this presentation, which I did give at Big Sky last summer. So bear with me if there's some of this is a repetition for you. I feel like in many ways I've told this story 100 times. And it really began, while many have called it a miracle, I've been calling it a marathon. And we really got the national splash when we reached the national average on NAEP in 2019. And so since then, I feel like I've been telling that story. And fortunately, and once again today, we've seen that we're holding our own. Every year, or every other year, I hold my breath and hope we don't slide back to the bottom. But we have some good news today, and that's good. And that tells us that we are sustaining this effort and have created a good fabric here in Mississippi. So I invite you into my fences within the Mississippi fences tonight. And I hope that what I am going to bring you is helpful to you. I welcome any questions you have. And if you want to interrupt me, I have about 30 slides, but I put that in the context of the hundreds of books that John Maxwell has written. So it just took me a little bit to kind of retrofit this. So it's not all those books, but it is a lot of his learning. So now if I can get it to advance. Okay, so tonight what I want to give you is a little snapshot of what we call the Mississippi model and what the features of that model were still are, and how they fit into kind of a systemic piece of work that we did here in Mississippi. Some of it was serendipitous and some of it was quite strategic, and I'll try to differentiate what was just luck and what was strategic. And to try to align the best I can. I'm not a scholar or one of those certified Maxwell people. I know you all know a lot about that, so if I trip up, I'm open to your corrections. But I've done a lot of reading since Nell asked me to do this, and so I've done my best to try to align some of his principles, because certainly there are many, both for leadership and also for teamwork, because it took both of those in the work we did here. All right, so for those of you who don't know what this marathon is about, Mississippi forever has been on the bottom of reading and everything else. We're on the bottom of all the good list and on top of all the bad list. And we had a great benefactor in Jim Barksdale. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his story tonight, that really got serious about getting us off the bottom. And so when I call this a marathon, it's been going on since 2000, when the Reading Institute was established with a $100 million investment by Jim Barksdale with the singular goal of getting us off the bottom. NAEP became, in year one, the single metric he was shooting for. And he's been a very successful businessman, that we used a lot of his business acumen and leadership skills to get us through this. So in 2003, which was the closest NAEP to after our founding, we were 49th. By 2019, we had moved to 29th when we reached the national average. And in 2022, we stayed the course and had risen to 21st. As of today, we are now 9th among all states for reading in fourth grade reading. So yeah, you can cheer.
Wait, Kelly, I'm like, I did not look at those NAEP scores yet. Are you 9th?
9th.
9th?
Yes,
Oh
we're
my
right
gosh.
there with Connecticut.
Oh my gosh. I mean, Jim must just be like, what an incredible story. Unbelievable.
Okay, so here's a little snapshot from 2013, which was the year that we passed the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, and it's the year our Mississippi model went to scale. Between then and 2024, you see that this is nothing to write home about. So I'm not bragging on these percentages, but it does show that we have gotten off the bottom and are at least up there with the national average, and in this case, above the national average. Again, nothing to write home about. We got a lot of work to do. For our African-American students, we have gone from 7th from the bottom to among the top 5. And as I looked at this today, we are now 3rd among for our African-American students, only comparing them to each other. We are 3rd in the nation for that. Again, we have a lot of work to do on this score, but it's progress. So we're not losing ground. All right, this in a snapshot is the marathon. So I used to have this as an animated slide, but I think it's helpful just for you to see it sort of as the big picture. So the Reading Institute was established in 2000. As you know, that was the year the National Reading Panel report was published. And we hit the ground running with the science as we knew it then. And that was 4 decades of research, or 30 years of research. By then, we're now at 50 years of research. But we were really armed and ready to embed the science of reading at every level in the system. After 2 studies, a study of our teacher prep programs, we determined that we were really failing our pre-service candidates, not teaching them the science of reading. The faculty knew very little about the science of reading. And so Barksdale was really on a mission to try to improve that. If we get it right in the first place, we won't have to retrain teachers. That led to our change in licensure. And so for the very first time, we had 6 hours of reading that were based on very minimal standards, but based on the National Reading Panel report, to make sure that at least pre-service candidates were being exposed to the 5 components of reading as we defined them then. That's a pretty low bar, but it was a start. In 2010, this was an important piece. We aligned our state test to Common Core, and that was a real game changer because our state tests were so easy and we thought everybody was doing swimmingly well. But then when we got to NAEP, we were always at the bottom. And so by readjusting that, it really changed how we taught, not just reading, but everything. And so that's a real, I'm sure all states have done that, but that was a real game changer for us here. In 2012, we passed the dyslexia screener. And then 2013 was the big banner year when we passed the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. We introduced early learning collaboratives where we piloted some early childhood to get kids ready for kindergarten. We instituted a kindergarten readiness test, which for the first time we now had statewide data before 3rd grade. In 2016, we introduced the Foundations of Reading Assessment, which I think is a bit of a double-edged sword, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But it was the first time we were really holding those EPPs accountable for their graduates knowing something about the science of reading. All of this work led to the governor asking Barksdale to convene a task force to really make sure that those higher ed measures and professional growth were put in place. And so we developed that professional growth model in the year 2017 with input from the higher ed. And that initiative led to the path forward. I don't know if you all are familiar with what we did with that. It has been living at the Hunt Institute and is, I think, perhaps sunset. The Hunt Institute's gone on to do some different things. But the path forward is a multi-state initiative to create teams of people in states so that they can work across the silos between teacher prep and state departments and the governor's office and legislature to make sure that the science of reading is embedded in pre-service content and delivery. All of that then hit us, we were able to hit the mark in 2019 by reaching the national average. And as you can see by these dots, we have stayed the course. And so, but this in the snapshot is the marathon. So let's talk about leadership. It really began, I described what Barksdale did here as the R&D phase of this marathon, where we were heavily investing in methodology that we were using in K-3 and in teacher prep. So we were working shoulder to shoulder in schools and in pre-service programs, trying to influence how they were preparing teachers and what curriculum they were selecting and doing real professional development. And this was before letters. I mean, we knew, I later learned that Louisa was hard at work developing letters. We were hard at work developing what we call Reading Universe, which is now a web-based service that is free to all teachers that takes all of our professional development stuff and puts it online. But we were training teachers in classrooms, much like we are still doing, which is what happened when we passed the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. So it was that coaching model that went to scale that then put us on the trajectory for reaching the national average on NAEP. If you look at our 20-year trajectory on NAEP, though, we have been steadily growing. It was only until we did it statewide in 2013 that it really shot up. And that's the lesson for other folks, because we've done the hard work of the R&D. And so now there's some things you can implement right away and hope that it impacts your NAEP as well. And not just NAEP, NAEP doesn't, we don't hang everything on NAEP because it's only a snapshot.
So Kelly, when you say you did the R&D, can you explain to us what that looked like on boots on the ground? Was that an opt-in, people chose to have you come, or they came to train at Barksdale, or was it regionally, like you went to different regions of Mississippi? It's a big state. So how did you, is it that people just became aware of you and wanted you to come, or what did that look like?
Well, they didn't always want us to come because we worked them hard. In fact, we had one school that boycotted, that ticketed us and said, Barksdale, go home. We took a look at the lowest performing schools, and of which most of them were. I mean, they were all poorly performing in reading. And over about a 3 or 4 year period, we worked in 180 schools that were the lowest performing based on the state test. And we assembled 30 and trained 30 literacy coaches. That was the first cohort of literacy coaches in the state. We brought in the best of the best. Marilyn Adams came to see us. Barbara Foreman came to see us. We trained our coaches with the best people in the country. And then we turned around and trained teachers in schools. We did something called peer coaching study teams, which were the precursor to PLCs. And every week we would meet, we would send a coach to every week. Coaches were in these buildings and they would visit classes, they would model instruction. We would introduce them to some of the science of reading that was all part of the curriculum of the Reading Universe. They would go back into their classrooms and practice it, get coached, more modeling, come back the next week. We would debrief how'd that go, and then give them another bite of the apple. And we did that over the course. The original Reading Universe was 38 sessions of professional development in how you teach reading.
Wow.
So that's what it looked like on the ground. Now, we learned some other lessons. We had parent centers. We were really interested in getting parents involved. And that was a hard lesson that we learned. Our parent centers were not, and they were well supplied and staffed. And we thought parents are going to show up and want to take all this material home. And what do you know? They didn't. And so when the state implemented the law, they did some very different and good things, thanks to Kimyana Burke, on taking stuff to parents. And so there were some lessons that we learned the hard way. But it was really boots on the ground, serious coaching, serious coaching.
Where were the leaders in this picture?
We about in year, I guess it was in about year 2006, we discovered that we could train these teachers one classroom at a time, or we could step back and train the leaders to train it so that they were fully on board. So we unplugged. We were not in all 180 schools at that time, but we unplugged and did a leadership cohort model. And we had 15 schools opt in. We did demonstration classrooms. So we turned those coaches into reading teachers and interventionists. We created Barksdale demonstration classrooms in 15 schools to see if we could somehow influence those school leaders. We ran into lots of issues there. Some were budgetary, some were curricular. But that was an important piece. And so that too, we took to the State Department when we were rolling that out and said, don't leave the school leaders behind, because you can't sustain it. And it's just going to be too expensive to do it otherwise. So that R&D then fueled the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. So this legislature came in and first year funded initially $9 million, which is a drop in the bucket compared to what your other budgets are. Florida got $100 million to do it. We are not a very populated state, but the next year we went back to them and said, we need $15 million to do this. And it's been $15 million ever since. So they have stuck to their guns and it's paid off. And that's a big piece of how you get this done. You just got to fund it. And that's funded those coaches for that period of time. And then that led to the State Department. We partnered with the State Department at the governor's request and created the rollout of the plan that really dispatched those coaches. So we designed the coaching position descriptions and helped get them off the ground. And MDE stepped in a big way, thanks to Carrie Wright, who was a great leader and really reorganized the State Department. So it was an efficient machine delivering good stuff.
Did the funding have a different initial push and then it decreased in funding, or is it funded at a sustained level?
Yeah, it's $15 million a year. So I don't know if they may have increased it last year. I think it was still at 15. So they haven't increased it except for that after that first year, because they were really wanting us to hire more coaches and we were having to train every coach that we hired. So everybody needed training in those early days. But they have sustained that level of funding.
It's impressive.
Okay, now let's move on to the leadership theories of Maxwell and see how we this is retrofitting now for me, because I was not operating under Maxwell when we set out to do all of this. So you all are familiar with these six, his types of leadership. And as I've reviewed them and learned more about them, these three really stuck out for me as the most applicable to how we did things. So transformational is where you set a high bar and you foster innovation. And we were really fostering innovation. Let's do things differently. Let's expect different things from the adults. And we really challenged the status quo in a lot of schools. Thus, some of them really weren't happy with us being there because we were asking them to change. And that's hard. It was situational from the standpoint that we we were operating, the schools were very similar to each other, but we were operating in settings where we had to adapt. Schedules were different. Personnel was different, or capacities of personnel was different. And so one of the hallmarks of work Barksdale did was that it remained very nimble. And as Jim, this is a quote from Jim, is don't be too proud to quit when something doesn't work. And so we did that. That's, when we were recognizing that we had to bring the leaders on, we stopped doing all that teacher by teacher work and backed up and said, let's see what we can do about school leadership. So that's an example of that. And I think over time we became really credible. We brought all these really great people into the state to train us, and we became the engine of the science. And still are in certain ways. That we're hoping that RENA universe is going to continue to offer good quality stuff. We've also created a literacy clinic for 4th through 8th grade. Now that we've kind of got a well-oiled machine for K-3, even though we've still got work to do there, we're turning our sights to creating a model for 4-8. So stay tuned. We've got more to report on that. All right, so this quote from John Maxwell, do the right things for the right reasons, and I translated that to Jim Barksdale is, do you know what it's like to be 50th in everything? And that was the motivating factor behind what we did. So let me tell you about Jim Barksdale. Jim was the former CEO of Netscape and the former COO of FedEx. And it was Jim Barksdale who really took FedEx globally. When you sign a package for at least when you get a FedEx package, you have to sign this little gizmo that tells the system that you've received the package and it's been delivered on time. That's a Jim Barksdale gizmo. And he really felt like we could lift the state off the bottom if we stuck to our guns. And as he says, keep the main thing the main thing. The day I met him, he said to me, if FedEx can get a package from the middle of Manhattan to the middle of Tokyo in 48 hours, it's probably faster now, but in 48 hours, track it along the way, guarantee its timely and safe arrival, we ought to be able to teach every child in Mississippi to read. And that's the mantra that we lived by, is that it's possible to do it. And the good news, as you all know, is we know how to do it. It's a matter of will. It's a matter of getting it done. And so this Stephen Covey is credited with this, keep the main thing, the main thing, the main thing, that Jim Barksdale really lived into that. And I know that John Maxwell has honored that as well. So that was a guiding leadership principle that I'm sure fits somewhere within John's list of things. This is a bench at Riverdale, which is Jim Barksdale's ranch in Holmes County, Mississippi. And it's outside his house there, and it's blazoned on the back. You can't read it very well, but it says, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. All right, so we talked about the R&D, and this is essentially what that comprised. We had a clear vision. We stuck to the science. We were nimble. We placed resources where they mattered. We held leaders accountable. And one of the things that we used was Public Impact, which is a great organization out of North Carolina that codified what they call 14 leader actions. It'd be interesting I haven't gone back to map those with Maxwell's principles. I'm going to share them with you here in a minute, but they were really helpful in pushing those leaders to change and to make changes in their building. We did what worked. We used Read Well as our elementary curriculum, and we liked it because it was explicit and it was very scaffolded for teachers, and it was mastery based. So kids didn't move unless they had mastered, and we're talking foundational skills now. And that was a big unifying effect that had it. And we measured and monitored what mattered. So we did a lot of assessment, diagnostic, progress monitoring, and kept our eye on NAEP.
Hey, Kelly.
Yeah.
I showed up in Mississippi, not just letters wise, but one of our mentees out here, Brittany Brewer, was in a school I showed up in Harrison County. And one of the greatest joys I had comes from this slide. I had Wanda, she was teaching kindergarten, and she had this crazy, amazing DIBELS data. We're talking like 98% proficiency. And I said, well, why is her data so different than other data? And the principal's like, you know what? Could you just go sit in a room all day and figure that out? And so I did. And guess what? She taught read well at a level that I already knew read well, but the way she taught it and what she was doing with it, and then the way the students were given what Carol Connor has gone on to talk about is student managed time and teacher managed time, and the pre-teaching, as Anita Archer teaches us, you must set forward and expect what you're going to inspect. So you have to teach the expectation, right? And she was so good at all of that. And I walked out of there, I go, this is the science of teaching. This is the science of learning. This is the science of reading. This is like an ecosystem that is humming at a level that issues a 33-year veteran at that point in time. And so what Barksdale had brought to her life was it had never left her. And of course, she had just been letters trained like that year or something. So it wasn't letters that did it. It was the infusion of what Barksdale did. So it was a really amazing story. And of course, that school went to 99% achievement on the third grade gate and on and on. It went from a D school to an A school. So you did great work is what I'm saying.
Well, thanks. It's nice to know that it was also sustained. That's what we've,
Yes.
yeah, that it, and teachers don't go back. Once they do it and it works, they don't go back. What school was that? Do you remember?
Bel Air.
Bel Air, a Barksdale school. That was one of our early Barksdale schools.
Yeah, thank goodness it was, because I was able to pull all that curriculum off the shelf, and we were able to get business done and go from a D to an A school. And it was because it was on the, they had gone through and there were enough remaining pillars left in the building.
Good. All right. That warms my heart. I'd like to know who she is. We'd like to get her on film. Yeah. Okay. I see we're only on slide 14. I have a lot to cover here. All right. So here are the components of the literacy model. We had a clear and measurable goal. Teacher, I've highlighted some things here. I think the four most important things in this model are teacher capacity. We focused on the adults in the building. Well-trained coaches. It is a magic bullet if there is one, and they'd have to be trained. We found 25 the first year. The legislature asked us to find 75, and we just couldn't do it. We found 25 teachers who were really willing to roll up their sleeves, and now we have built a really good cadre of well-trained coaches. The State Department has done a terrific job of that. Mastery-based curriculum. I think this high-quality curriculum, as we know, is really important, and I think we're getting better at that. There's nothing perfect yet, but we are light years away from where we were. It was a good thing we had Read Well when we did. And purposeful interventions, because we know that so many kids come in behind, particularly in Mississippi, come in behind. And so we got to keep them up. We got to get them up, catch them up quickly so they can keep moving. Coaching was critical. This is our coaching cycle. The State Department went on and has done some other training and don't follow this cycle precisely. But it was really a critical piece of what we did. And I think the important piece of it is the feedback loop, that teachers were very engaged, and it helped make data transparent. Kimyana tells some great stories about teachers saying, I don't need your help. I'm doing just fine. And then she sits down with them with their data, and lo and behold, it's not so great. So this is a centerpiece of the model. I need to get a new chart here for Alabama, because I'm sure it's not the same, but I like to show this chart because it typifies what coaching does. We learned a lot from Alabama's reading initiative. In fact, that's where we learned about Read Well and brought it home and implemented it. And in the year that we began to go up, it was the year Alabama unfunded their literacy coaches in the early grades. I think they've gone back to refund them, but you can see what happens when you unplug coaching. So it's a dramatic way to tell that story. this is the public impact leader actions. I'm not going to read it all through to you, but I want to make you aware of it, because there's some key pillars here that I think are aligned with Maxwell principles, and they're all focused on adults changing behavior and being accountable and to each other. Okay, so now we're going to move into the leadership and the teamwork principles. We're going to do the irrefutable laws of leadership. I've selected 5. There are probably more, but in the interest of time and to really, I think, sort of boil this down, these are the 5 that I think are most aligned with what we did. So we're going to unpack them a little bit. Okay. All right, so you all know what the law of navigation is. A leader must have a clear vision and a plan to reach the destination. This was really true. And remember the Jim Barksdale story of getting us off the bottom and using NAEP as our metric. Of course, we used a lot of other things along the way, but we had a clear vision, get us off the bottom. And that was a pretty clear marching order. The governor chimed in and was not interested in social promotion. He himself was a dyslexic and had been held back in 3rd grade. And there was a lot of discussion about what this retention was going to do. And we elected early on to not focus on retaining 9-year-olds, but improving and training adults. I mentioned that we were working in 180 schools, and we were very nimble along the way. So we learned our lessons and we kept moving and building the data. The law of solid ground, trust in the foundation, is the foundation of leadership, and we gained that trust. As I used to say, when we would meet with teacher prep programs or with school boards or with school districts, $100 million may have gotten us a seat at the table, but we had to earn our keep to stay there. And that's when we turned and really made the Institute the engine of the science. And over time, people began to trust that and to reach out to that. Particularly the governor, who felt like we had some leverage in making changes in districts across the state. Let me go back to one thing. I can't say enough about the State Department in Mississippi under Carrie Wright's leadership. We have a new superintendent who's promising to be very effective. But Carrie arrived at a time where we really needed to make changes, and she built a good, strong team that was very reliable. And Kimiana likes to talk about, we used to say when the State Department arrives, you know, you're in trouble, that they've just come to be punitive. But when the Mississippi Department of Education shows up in your building, they're coming with good tools, and they are coming to be supportive in your partner. And that's a nice relationship that doesn't exist everywhere. The leadership law of priorities, leaders prioritize their time. We kept the main thing. We made the structured literacy block sacred. We developed and mobilized those coaches. So we prioritized energy. We focused first and foremost on their knowledge, resources, and know-how. We measured what mattered. Reading growth was most important, and then went to scale by prioritizing the lowest performing schools. I know I'm whipping through these, so bear with me. The leadership law of explosive growth. Leadership can create explosive growth when the right conditions are in place. This is Kimiana again. I keep referring to her. She and I worked shoulder to shoulder for those decades. She calls this the perfect storm. And now I've lost my cursor to advance. I call this a star alignment. She called it the perfect storm. Jim Barksdale had the foresight that he was going to invest in early literacy and make it a priority. That coupled with the model through that R&D phase. So we tested things. The legislature stepped in and funded it. The SEA was an important piece, and district readiness. School leaders were saying, and teachers were saying to us, well, we have been on the bottom forever. Maybe we don't know how to teach reading. And so there was a sort of openness and culture of we are ready for change. And these are these sort of five bullets or the stars that were aligned. So other states have some things to learn from this alignment.
Hey, Kelly, in this important slide, could you briefly state where you just nonchalantly say, and then the legislature is just ready to fund the change? Was it that easy? Didn't you have a lot of local control as well?
Well, the legislature, the governor really was pushing for um, third grade. He was tired of social promotion, and he had a good education advisor who actually had come from Barksdale training. And so she was advising him about things that could happen. We were not keen on the retention approach initially, and in fact pushed back pretty hard when he said, let's do it by retaining kids. But when we realized the writing was on the wall, we said, okay, we're going to need to train. Teachers are going to need training. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole bunch of kids that are repeating, and nobody wanted that. And so while the third grade law is a kind of a double-edged sword, it really motivated people, and it motivated the elementary schools to say, we better receive this training. We better get on board, or our kids are going to fail because it's now the law. And of course, there were some good cause exemptions that sort of padded it a little bit, but it was right. The state was ripe for change, and the fact that we Barksdale had been, in that field, working on the ground, doing this, gave them some comfort that we had a plan. We weren't just going to fumble our way through this. So, and it's what I hope other states can take from this is Barksdale really did spend the money to figure out how to do this. Now, not everybody's like Mississippi, and we do not have a bargaining teachers union. And so some of what we were able to do, we didn't encounter that as a factor. Not that teacher unions are bad. It's just a factor that's a player when you're trying to make wholesale change. But yeah, the legislature was pretty on board, and we had some really good leaders in the legislature, on the education committee. The law of legacy. So it's not just about the present, it's about lasting for future generations. And so with this new NAEP scores that we got out today, again, NAEP is not the only thing, but it's one metric that tells us we're not losing ground, we're staying the course. And that's the biggest legacy of all. It is that we have really knitted together a fabric that's holding up teacher knowledge and student achievement. I always like to give credit to our partners. Barksdale was a big influencer in this work, but Carrie Wright and her team were ready to roll out and was very effective in rolling out. Kenyana is the queen of implementation, and the Mississippi legislature, and these stars aligned in just the right way in time. These two legacy projects at the bottom, Reading Universe and Mississippi Reading Clinic, are how we're trying to carry on the work with the Barksdale ethos here. Indeed, around the world now, the Reading Universe has been, it's live, it's still a prototype where it's a work in progress, but we have heard from teachers in 213 countries. And so the world is hungry for how to teach reading. This is also a lesson about the law of buy-in, which is the one Maxwell lesson that I don't agree with, or at least in this education setting. In the corporate setting, it might be fluid. But our experience is that we had to force change in practice to illustrate that when you teach kids differently with this science, with this method, this structured literacy, they will learn. We knew they would learn. We had just proven it at 180 schools. And in those demonstration classrooms, we took the lowest first, second, and third graders when we were in those demonstration classrooms. We were the reading teacher for the lowest kids in the building. And by Christmas, those kids had surpassed the kids in the homeroom, back in the homeroom. So we knew it would work. And what the law did was say, you have to do it differently. And nobody's off the hook. Everybody's going to have to do that. We're going to give you a coach. We're going to give you materials, and we're going to stand with you to help you learn how to do it. But you have to do something differently. And as soon as they began to do that, kids began to perform. And then you've got buy-in. So this is the one law that I kind of flip on its head to say, teacher beliefs come along when they see that it works.
Well, Kelly, we call it the law of buoying up because
Buoying up. I
you have
like
to buoy up because
Yeah.
it's empowerment and knowledge that changes the paradigm, right?
Yes.
And then you buy in, right? So
So
definitely,
true. Well
I
put.
agree
I
with
like
you.
that. I like that. All right. So here are the teamwork laws. I've selected these 4 because I think they are most aligned with what we did here. The law of the compass, which is vision gives team members direction and confidence. We had clear marching orders, both coming out of Jim Barksdale's 180 schools and the specificity that the Literacy-Based Promotion Act added to that. It fueled the model, and we were running. We were ready to hit the ground running, and that was great. And that they mandated this professional development and funded it. So what that 15 million buys is we are now using AIM instead of letters. There's some reasons for that, but that changed about 2 years ago. But that funded professional development plus coaching is really set the course. And so that's I think an important way to think about the teamwork. Law of the niche, all players have a place where they add most value. This is we trained everybody. We trained principals, coaches, teachers, interventionists, paraprofessionals, parents, and then we taught students. All the adult players were provided training. Knowledgeable principals became bona fide instructional leaders. We increased the impact of paraprofessionals. We did a lot of work with paraprofessionals and turned them into real supports for literacy. And then State Department was really the fulcrum that dispatched and monitored and managed and coordinated all this work directly in the schools. The law of the bench, this is really what I think about is our state cadre of coaches as the strong bench. In this case, it was the individuals carrying out roles in the schools, but that the coaches were training all those roles and then also delivering their own role in that setting. We had professional development for all those players. This is in red because we really developed a pipeline of coaching leadership that still exists today. We are about to hire our 3rd literacy director following Kim Yano's departure. And so stay tuned because we're looking for a really good literacy director. The AIM Institute stole our last one in Kristen Wynn, though we're thrilled for her. But there's a good cadre of coaches there ready to carry on. We had guidance and expectations regarding parent support for literacy. That was built into the law. And sustaining the bench costs money. So the legislature has really continued to fuel this with their funding every year at that sustained level. So that's a message. This is a slide you can take to your legislature. And then Mount Everest, as the challenge escalates, the need for teamwork elevates. School-based teams met in those peer coaching study teams. We were building school-based engines to reinforce the instruction and track the progress. School leaders were convened to address common challenges. MDE forged their own strong team of those coaches for continuity across the state. And by putting a pause on local control, which is the American way, I know, we were able to deliver professional development quickly and consistently, universally. I call it blanketing the state. And when we were able to do that, that's when we got traction. what other states do, and because of local control, the district decides when they will do the professional development, often who they will use, who will get trained. And we made it a universal, this is where we're going to do it statewide. And I think that was a big difference maker. It's really what enabled us to get traction fast. And once you had everybody singing off the same page, you really had a different ethos across the state. Okay, so where to start? I like this Maxwell's risk test. And I've moved this slide, it used to be up further, but I moved it to the end because it's really where you all are to a certain extent, which is what is the risk? And if you've got it built on a strategy, which we totally did, we were going to bring the science of reading to bear on instruction everywhere. You have some margin for error. We were able to be flexible. You can learn from our mistakes, but you'll need to learn to be flexible in order to pivot as the capacity of people is tested. Is it an extension of what you do well? Maybe not yet, but we know how to do it. And so it's an extension of what somebody else knows how to do well. And you all have NEL in your state, at least Montana. I guess there are other states here. Does it reasonably challenge you? And this is where the investment in time and personnel, thank you, legislature, is necessary to tackle the job. But we've got a proof point now. Mississippi is off the bottom. We have gone from 49th to 9th in fourth grade reading, and we have sustained that for, well, the last 3 NAEPs pretty evenly. We're not growing as much as we need to. It's the fact that everybody else is staying stagnant or not growing or going down. So again, I'd say there's nothing to write home about this, but if you change teacher practice and if everybody's rowing in the same way, kids will learn to read. And you'll get off the bottom or you'll grow from wherever it is you currently are. All right, so let's revisit the Mississippi model. Embrace a vision for change, adhere to the science, commit to being nimble, place resources where they matter, hold leaders accountable, do what works, sorry for the typo, measure and monitor what matters. End of sermon.
Woo! Thank you. Everybody, this is something that I am holding near and dear right now, probably more than a lot of you out there, is because 40 states have passed science of reading legislation. Some of my colleagues out there are from Montana who've joined tonight because Montana has put a 1.5-page document on the table to consider science of reading legislation. And I really think that it deserves a really incredible, collaborative, thoughtful dialogue. And it just is the timing. Kelly agreed to do this before I even thought about what time of year it was. And so just so grateful for the Montanans who jumped on and who want to learn and know that there are roadmaps out there for us. And so many of you have also done great things in your states, and some of you are working for your state departments. There's a lot of you out there are. So if you're listening to this later or listening to it now, we're so grateful that you have, joined the journey to really transform the entire nation. And I think there's a lot to be learned in Kelly's story. I have long believed, and my colleague Terry Nolan and I have stated in our leadership trainings, we don't have a literacy crisis, we have a leadership crisis. And what Mississippi taught us is that it is a collaborative team that really has allowed for this floating of all boats in Mississippi. So I'm going to throw it out to y'all if you have questions for Kelly or just gratitude. I know some of you from Mississippi too. So please turn on your mics and let Kelly know if you have any questions.
Who's from Mississippi? Wave at me. Oh, good. Okay. I need to come see you. Are you in Harrison County?
I was. Right now I'm in Long Beach at Coast Episcopal. but I was at Bel Air and that's how I met Danielle.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's who you were talking about, Nell.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Nice to meet you.
And I do remember the name, Kelly, so we'll send it to you. And I think we'll know how to contact her for you.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Great. Okay.
Anybody out there want to ask Kelly a question or a comment?
Well, we're all still working hard, and I know you are too. It's an evening, at least it's evening here in Mississippi. So appreciate your coming to listen and just to do the work that you're doing every day.
Kelly, it's such a powerful story, and I am so thankful for the share as well. It's one thing I felt very accomplished when I was able to do that in one school, but the impressiveness of being able to carry this off with a state. I mean, it's mind blowing. And I certainly agreed with some of the things where you were like, well, there were a few things that might not flow with John Maxwell's law, because at some point you just had to say, no, we're doing this, whether you've bought in or not. And so I think that was powerful. But I also think there's power, the buy-in, like Danielle said, buoy up, but also there's that buy-in. Once you start seeing those results, it's pretty amazing. And yeah, I couldn't help myself, Danielle. I was pulling up a little bit of NAEP stuff while I was listening with both ears, but I was like, I got to see where we're at, what has been accomplished. And yeah, there's some stuff on there that's just like, oh no, but you know what? We're going to keep going. What is it? Our Alabama friends that have been doing the work for 20 years and keeping the faith, and they just keep plugging away, and it's going to pay off. It has to.
Well, I think part of our messaging right now, as we look at NAEP and as everybody's being critical of schools and is at the Reading Universe, we've created a kind of a one-pager to sort of explain for teachers what NAEP means, what it tells us and what it doesn't. And the beauty of what you all know is the how. That's the good news of all this, is that we know how to teach kids to read. And so it's not like we have to stop and figure that out. And while NAEP tells us whether or not they're doing it, and it's to, but it's very limited in what it really tells us. And so it's a great window for your voices to speak into that, that we do. I mean, it could accelerate what we do on the ground, because NAEP's just a dipstick. And we really do know how kids learn to read and how we know how to teach them. So it's just a matter of will. It's an adult problem.
Hey, Misty, your mic came off. Did you want to ask a question?
I did not, but I did want to tell Kelly that I got to listen to her at Big Sky, and I, of course, loved it. And of course, being her neighbor here in Alabama, I got to watch all of this. And we are so extremely proud of the work that Mississippi has done and continues to do. And Kelly, your work and your part that you have played in making history is amazing. And it continues to be an inspiration. So you keep telling this story over and over again.
Thank you, Misty. And we loved working with Alabama. When we came to do your teacher prep programs, and y'all took that and ran with it. It's good. You were serious about it. So it sounds like your NAEP was looking pretty good today. Have you had a chance to look?
We're pleased. Yeah, all day. We are absolutely pleased with the right direction. Like you said, it's certainly nothing to write home about. Like, we know we've got a long way to go in the United States, but we're moving in the right direction in both reading and math right now. And but that is because of, like you said, structures and supports have been put in place, and it takes time. It is a marathon. And I loved it when you all came out and said that. No, it's a marathon. And so that's what we're doing. We're running the marathon.
You know what I'm loving, Kelly, is that so many of the faces that are on this call right now and that will join later and watch it later because we have so many in our mentorship, is that they all have really powerful stories in their own schools. Taylor's calling in from home right now tonight, but she actually works in a 2-room schoolhouse in rural Montana as a multi-grade level teacher, right? And Teresa was a principal in Alaska that led a school to incredible achievement, which is why to think of moving a state versus a school, you know, we have Alabama, Oklahoma, Minnesota, everybody out there on this call has got a microcosm of what Mississippi's done at a macro level. But what you reminded us of is we always have to start somewhere, and we have to start small, and we have to replicate that. And it's possible to replicate that, but it has to be done with common vision and teamwork and moving in the same direction. And I think that ultimately, for those of us that are in this work, and we've been doing it for a few decades now, it's that complex environment where there are competing priorities, many different voices at the table thinking that different things have to be happening. To Jim Barksdale's credit, keep the main thing the main thing. And I still fight with that when I'm working in school districts who haven't raised their literacy statistics. The main thing is still literacy, and if it hasn't worked out, then we still have an adult problem. So to your point, it's just you got to be bulldog with this. You can't let it go. You got to just stay on the course. And I just still am. I'm just in shock and awe that you went to 9th. I mean, I'm just so impressed. Thank you.
Well, maybe y'all should all run for the legislature. Now, you shouldn't have to pass a law to get people to do the right thing.
No.
But it certainly got folks' attention, and you know, well crafted, it can serve as an impetus. But we just didn't have anywhere to go but up, and so we put our minds to it, and you can too.
Yes, thank you. So thank you again, Kelly. We're at the top of the hour, so I just want to say a lot of gratitude out to all y'all. And if you have any questions after this, just let me know. I can pop a handout on the website, or if you're calling in tonight and want a handout, just let me know. Email me. We're grateful you're out there, and we'll be talking soon. So thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Nell. I love you.
Okay, love you too. Okay, bye-bye.